Um, so with today's session, the focus is on listening. Are there any questions that you have about the CELPIP listening exam?
So actually, I don't know. I feel that I can understand all of they are saying and listening
Yep.
records, but when answering the questions, they are asking very tough questions that I don't know that I should have been concentrated with when I was listening.
Yeah.
Is there any strategy or anything to do to manage that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and we'll look at a couple of CELPIP questions. And I'm going to talk about one strategy which I've talked about a lot more in my videos. And then I'm going to talk about taking notes, which I didn't talk about in my videos. Um, uh, so let's, and then, so when you, well, I'll share the screen here so that we can, so with the listening, as a basic overview, uh, let me just go down. Sorry, I was right there. So I'll just give a quick intro to it. So in listening, you're going to have several sections. So they call them parts, and then they're on different themes. So the problem solving, the daily life conversation, and listening for information, those are often short and easy to follow along with. And then once you've done the listening, then you click next to the questions. So in those areas, the well, in all of listening, they're looking at questions in three areas, either main idea questions, so those are kind of big picture, or detail questions. So those are more about the person, the number, the name, the time, where are they going, who did they talk to, or the questions that you might be referring to, which I and other students find challenging, are inference or logical thinking questions. So those are the types where it says what might happen next, or where will they be going after this conversation.
Yeah.
And so the detail questions, I think for a lot of students, they find it's fairly straightforward. The main idea of, what's happening, that's where you're looking at either the title or if there's a picture in the question, it gives you some of those clues. Um, but the logical thinking or what inference questions, what will happen next, that's where you're putting yourself into that situation. And CELPIP emphasizes this more than any of the other exams. When you're doing your speaking, when you're doing the writing exercises, or here with listening, you need to think, if you were here, let's say you lived in Canada for 5 or 7 years, what would you say? What would you write? What would you do in those situations? The nice thing is they're not academic university type things. And the reason it's nice is because those can be a little bit more difficult to think of unless you're in a situation like you are. But
Yeah.
for example, for yourself, if you're at the University of Manitoba, it might be conversations not in a classroom, but when you meet somebody in the cafeteria, or when you're going to park your vehicle in the parking lot and you have a conversation with the security guard or somebody that's in those areas. So it's
Mhm.
real life situations, and that's where the logical thinking, you're kind of thinking, okay, if I was in this situation, where would I go next? Or based on those details. So let me just highlight about these different sections, and then we'll look at a couple of questions and we'll look at the clues to help you find some of the answers.
Yeah.
So with the different parts, there's 8 questions with problem solving, and those are very short, simple statements where they say something and then you choose one of four answers. Daily life, so it could be in the workplace, shopping mall, getting a ticket for a movie, etc. Information, news, discussion. So the information and news, this is more of, you'll hear some recordings. Sometimes it's even a video of different people talking, and then you're identifying the information from that. Or in the discussion, they've also often had a video now in the last exams. So you have 2 or 3 people sitting down, and you'll hear different people talking about a event or activity or a club that they're all in. And then the viewpoints is the most difficult because you're going to usually hear 2 different viewpoints. and you don't see the questions until later, like you said. So then you're like, well, what are the main ideas or the details that I need to remember from those parts?
Yeah.
So let me just go, so in the top right-hand corner, where it has, I think it's under, let me just see here. I'll go to the listening exam, and let me, my screen's too big, so I can't, let me make it a bit smaller so I can see this part. Okay, free resources. So let's go look at a listening exam itself, and then, oh, well, actually, I'll highlight this before we go there. So under Prepare for CELPIP, they actually have videos and sections on each area. So I just scrolled and rolled through those, but they have Speaking Pro, they have Writing Pro, Reading Pro, and then Listening Pro. So go and take a look at those as well, because that'll give you some of the instructions from a CELPIP examiner. I'm looking for test format, test results. Okay, why can't I find it? What I'm looking for right now is the, it should be here under free resources. I'm looking for the exam, basically.
The free trial, yeah.
There we go. It's further down. That's where they used to have a different format that I'm more familiar with. So there's two exams that you can take for test A and test B. I'm always in my videos talking about test A, which allows students then to learn strategies and practice with that, but then to go to test B and practice those strategies again. So when you click on the first section, you can go through the complete test in order, or you can choose a specific category. In this case, we want to talk about the listening. And I'm just going to click through some of these parts here. Let's put that on silent. So with the first parts, with the statements, part of your challenge is you have a timer, so you can see it's counting down. But what you want to get good at with reading and with listening is when you can see the questions, like in the first couple of parts, then look through the questions as you're listening to see what are the differences between this. And usually the differences will be either about time, so some are in the past, some are in the present, or maybe the future, or they're going to be about positive or negative things. So when you look through here, is one positive or negative? So I want to see the concert again. Is that positive or negative?
Oh, yeah, that's positive. I
Yeah,
want to see the concert again. Yeah,
yeah.
that's positive.
Okay, number 2,
Negative.
3,
That's negative as well.
good, and 4.
Negative. The
Yeah,
concert.
so
Yeah.
sometimes you'll find 2 positive, 2 negative statements. Other times, and more often, it'll be like this, where you have 3 negative statements and 1 positive, or 3 positive, 1 negative. But right away, I can just glance and see those main ideas or main verbs, key words. That's going to help me to then, so as I'm listening, I listen to the sentence and then I glance through the questions. If I don't catch some of the vocabulary or some of the key ideas from the listening, at least I can be narrowing down my answers from the way the questions are formed. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I rewind this and we'll listen to this, I'm not sure, we'll see, hopefully you guys can hear this.
Unfortunately, I missed the concert last night.
Okay, so unfortunately, I missed the concert last night. So when you look at these, it says, unfortunately, I missed. So the concert wasn't good. Well, I don't know. I missed it. It was canceled. No, I had the problem. So I want to see it, or I didn't attend.
I didn't attend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. I didn't attend the concert. So these are some of the beginning questions. They're easier to answer because you guys are used to, like, the first sections of the exam are a little bit short and easy. but the same strategies are what you're going to be practicing over and over with the easier questions, so that when you get to the harder questions, then it's faster and more automatic for you.
Yeah.
So before I go further with CELPIP questions, I want to highlight something that I've often talked about with students, yeah, it's this one. So I always refer students to ESLlab.com. And the reason is, under listening activities, they have easy, intermediate, and difficult. And they also have a section for academic listening, which is intermediate, difficult, and very difficult. The reason I like this is too many students watch movies or watch stuff on YouTube, and there's such variance, meaning there's such change with how the people are speaking. So if I watch 3 different YouTube videos, there's going to be different rates of speech, different topics, different areas that might be confusing. It's not at a level by level section. So what I recommend for more practice outside of an exam, because in an exam there's strategies and you're trying to listen. So what I always recommend, and I'll just go back to the first year, is I ask students to start at the intermediate level with the under listening activities. And there's a whole list of different sections and topics, but they're all structured at the same level. And so the nice thing with this, that allows me to listen to several. Okay, so that allows me to listen to several different conversations, but know that they're all the similar level, similar ability that I need. When I'm getting most of these correct, so 75, 80% of your answers on your questions, then I would go to the next level being difficult, and I would go through 6 or 8 or 10 of those as well. Then I would go to the academic, even though the CELPIP is not academic, but this is building your listening skills step by step. Okay, so that's where a lot of times students say to me, I only have 1 or 2 CELPIP exams, or I bought the CELPIP additional practices, but it's limited. It's only 2 or 3 or 5, whatever package that you buy from them. So this is how you get extra practice in the strategies without having to necessarily have the CELPIP exam material. And for me, it's similar. If you and I were playing basketball, if I was your coach for basketball, I wouldn't just go and put you into games in different schools. We would be practicing 5 or 6 days a week and then having games once or twice. So this is what I look at as, this is your practice time to learn and work on the skills. Identify, I'll just show you a quick example. So under this topic about the national park, it has a pre-listening exercise with idioms. You have the listening, and then you have questions with 3 answers. So you would do a similar thing as we looked at with CELPIP with the first few questions. In this case, they're not different, but you see that they're different topics. One's about the wildlife, one's about the weather or climate, and one's about the geology. Okay, what is one reason for hiking? More enjoyable, it's less in case of emergency. So you start to pick up on the key words as you're listening, and that way you use those same strategies with the CELPIP listening. Okay, does that make sense how these fit together?
Yes. May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what about taking notes when listening? That's the first
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
Second
Okay.
part, okay,
Yeah. No. Go ahead. Sorry. Ask everything.
oh, that's fine. So, um, oh, I forgot.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
So what I've talked about so far, I've talked in more detail and with more practice in the listening videos that are on our Facebook group. So as I mentioned at the start of this class, go to the unit section, and then there's 2 videos that give you listening strategies. And I also highlight and give you the links for the ESL Lab website as well. So the first, yeah, so when you see the questions and you're answering and identifying keywords, listening, practicing, etc., use the ESL Labs and the CELPIP and even IELTS material to practice those strategies. Now let's go and talk about some of the harder questions where we're taking
Listening.
notes.
Yeah.
This is the last.
I'm just going to,
Question
yeah,
one.
sorry, I'm going
What is the woman eventually hoping to find?
to jump through a bunch of these earlier questions. I want to get past part one. Actually, there's another thing I can be doing. Okay, so I'm just going to put it on mute, go to the next one, put it on mute. This for some, yeah, so it doesn't let you go next until it's all passed. But when you put it on mute a couple of times, then it starts to automatically mute the next ones. Okay, yeah, let's go. So you can see here, just in the first section, they have 8 sections, sorry, 8 questions with short, very short listenings. Okay, so once we get to the next section, then I'll
Listening to
okay. So here they give you some context. So at least this is where I said, imagine yourself in that room or in that place. And then I can see right now there's 2 minutes that this will be. So this is a longer recording. So let's talk now about note taking, because you can't see any questions on this page. So you've already heard that it's about, and I'll just go back to review this, but it's 2 co-workers. The woman is having challenges finishing a project. So when it says the woman, is the second person a woman or a man?
We'll figure it out. We don't know yet.
Well, actually we do, because of how it's phrased. So if there's 2 women, it can't say the woman, because that would mean you don't know, is it A or B? So when
Okay.
it says the woman, we know that the other person has to be a man. Otherwise, they would say woman A or Jane, or some other way to show a difference if there's 2
Yeah.
women.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is true.
Yeah. So that's where those are these little clues that when we look at, that helps us in a little bit. And so when I go to the conversation,
You don't look so good, eh?
so what you're going to look at here then is whether it's 2 women or 2 men or a man and a woman, any combination is fine. But what we want to identify is when we're listening here, what's happening. So in this case, with my notes, and you guys, if you have a pen and paper, or if you want to take a few notes while we're listening, identify what is some of the things the man says and what are some of the things the lady says. We'll do this as an exercise, and then I'm going to take you to a PDF that gives more details. It's more from an academic focus, but it has good strategies that I found that help you once we've practiced this once. So let's listen. We're not going to listen to all of it, but let's listen to the first 30 or 40 seconds, and then we'll talk about what's happened so far.
And you look pale. Is everything all right with you?
I'm okay. I just haven't slept much lately, and I guess it's starting to show. I've been working on a couple of projects, and the work is taking much longer than I thought it would. I've been up most nights writing the reports that are due the next week.
You should get some more sleep. Why don't you finish the reports after work?
Okay, so let's just pause there. When you look at and listen to the man, what is his feeling or attitude? Is he happy? Is he sad? Is he concerned? Is he worried? Is he disappointed?
I don't know. He seems concerned about her
Yeah,
case.
concerned, I would say.
Okay, yeah. So his questions are, because he says, you look pale, and then why don't you do this after work? Okay. And when he asks, why does she look pale? Are you okay? What is the woman's response?
She's not having enough sleep.
Okay. And did you hear why? Or
Because a couple of projects that she
Yeah.
needs to submit a reports.
Right.
Some reports.
Yeah, okay. So she hasn't been having enough sleep, and there's a couple of projects or reports that she's working on. So that's your tone for the conversation. And now we're going to see what happens. So usually when there's a problem, what usually happens next? So when people are talking and one says, I have this problem, what happens next usually?
I guess they are trying to explain how to solve it. Or,
Good, yeah. So usually somebody says, well, here's my problem, here's what's happening. And then either they try to solve the problem or they go into more detail about different problems that have come because of this first problem, like cause and effect. And maybe you haven't studied psychology or read a lot, but usually when men have a problem or hear a problem, we try to solve it. So we say, do this, do
Yeah.
this.
yeah.
Usually when women have a problem and they're talking about it, they might want a solution, but usually they're also just wanting somebody to listen as they explain what the problem is or what's bothering them.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's a little bit aside. That's not part of the CELPIP, but you'll probably hear some solutions and then maybe some reasons why those solutions don't work from that. So let's listen a little bit further.
Before you go home for the day.
I can't. I have to pick up my son at the daycare right after work. And when I get home, I have to fix dinner and watch my son until he falls asleep around 10.
That's such a late bedtime.
Okay, so why can't she work at home?
She has lots to do after work.
Okay.
Yeah, like she has to pick her son from school, then she has to prepare the dinner or the
Right,
food, and then she has to babysit her son till he goes to bed.
exactly. Perfect. So when you're thinking about what kinds of questions, the question will either be general. So like I said earlier, there's main idea questions, and then there's sorry, I'm just going to send a message to Tolfi because his audio isn't connecting. So in this situation, you might get a question about why is the woman not able to work or to do this after work? And that would be a general, and then there would be several different reasons. And the main one is taking care of her family. That's your main idea.
Yeah.
Or the question might go into specific details. Why can't the woman do these activities after work? And there would be some choices: taking care of her son and making dinner, or taking care of her husband, or going to a concert. Or so you can start to anticipate what are common questions. And what I would recommend is go and find either in the IELTS, either from IELTS questions or this ESL labs that I showed you guys earlier. Go through 5 or 6 exams and just look at the questions and just identify what are common questions that they ask about.
Yeah.
Because this is kind of your pre-work, because too many students rush into the exam and then they're trying, like I said earlier, they're trying to understand the question, take notes, think about what might be asked, etc. But if you pre-plan a bit, meaning you go back and say, well, what are common questions? And I already know in CELPIP, it's either main idea, detail, or so in these settings, when I'm taking notes, if I went back, I don't know if I can move this back a bit. If I went back as I'm taking notes in this middle part of when she's talking, I would write down pick up son, make dinner, or just dinner, and then help son till 10, or 10 p.m. son sleeps. Those types of words are enough for me to then remind myself when I get to the actual questions. Okay.
Yeah.
How is this answering some of your questions so far?
Yeah, I think it looks good now.
So what I'm suggesting is two approaches. One is understand from other exams what are common main idea, specific detail, or what will happen next type questions. And then the second is when you're taking notes, here's some things to listen for. You know, she's busy with family, main idea, and then what are the things? Pick up son, make dinner, and help her son till 10 p.m. So when you get to the questions, it doesn't matter whether it's going to be a main idea question or a specific detail question with some of those activities listed in it. You now have all those answers from the notes that you wrote down.
Yeah, what I believe that it becomes more difficult when the choices are a little bit
One.
similar.
Yes,
So otherwise, if they are asking about something, if the choices have something that has never mentioned in the recording.
right, the inference one. So let me just click through here a little bit, because those probably won't, those are often more in parts 4, 5, and 6. Especially the inference. So maybe when they're having a discussion in part 5 or in part 6 where there's two different viewpoints and you're having to put together some ideas. Let me just, yeah, I'll jump over into part 3 and see if we can find one of these.
Listening for information.
Okay, so
Thanks, Dr. Burns, for speaking to.
So I'm just going to go to a little bit further here. Okay, so we haven't heard the question or the passage yet, right? I'm going to make it a bit challenging. So let's look at this question. So let's analyze the question first from the information. So what are the different here? I'll make it a little bit bigger for us. What are the different questions or answers that we have here? Okay, so Isa, in the first one, what are the key words in the one that I'm highlighting now?
Like preserving and successful.
Okay. Okay, and then what about number 2?
High standards.
Okay, so these are kind of similar. They're working and doing well, being
Yeah.
successful, they have high standards. But what's the difference between being successful and having high standards?
It might be having the high standards, might be higher quality.
Right. So they might not be doing as much, but they're taking their time with high standards to do better.
Yeah.
So when I'm seeing questions where there's similarities, because these are both like earlier I showed you simply is it positive or negative? Well,
Yeah.
here they're both positive. Now I need to look at what's the vocabulary or what's the information. If I'm not clear between A and B and the difference between them, then it doesn't matter how much I've studied before the exam. And if I don't know some of the vocabulary, I'm going to have to just guess either A or B. But at least I could eliminate C and D because they probably didn't talk about group environments and this one is negative.
Yeah.
So now I have a 50-50 chance between A and B rather than I don't know. And what I see with most students is I missed that, I don't understand it, I'm just going to answer B. Well, that's a 1 in 4 chance, but because you've practiced in the weeks before the exam of how do you pick through different choices, this at least narrows down your choice, and you'll always have that 15, 20 seconds, sometimes 30 seconds. So that's where you can be making it a little bit easier for yourself by narrowing those answers and choices down. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. That is true.
Okay, so I might come back to number 3, but let me just go. I want to find a different one with, okay. Okay, so here, for example, I have 4 different choices, and I have these are all detail. This is a detail question. So avoid working in groups, focus on details, prioritize tasks, or take time off. So if I don't remember or if I don't identify which one of these are, at least as we saw earlier, I can look to narrow down my ideas. So if it didn't talk about groups, then I take A off. And then I'm thinking, well, is it the details? And that could relate back to the previous question about high standards. Or is it prioritizing tasks, which maybe they talked about how do you organize your schedule or do this first or do this, or identify which is more important that I have to do first and then second, then third. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where, for me, as a native English speaker and as somebody who teaches strategies, I'm applying several different strategies as I go through. I find somebody listening, I go to the answers, I see which of these make sense. If I'm confused, I then see, well, what's the difference between some of these? So this is negative, this is positive, this was groups, and it didn't talk about groups. So I'm being analytical. I'm analyzing my answers while I'm going through to narrow down what could be the choice. And there might be times where, even for me, I'm not sure, is it B or C? But like I said earlier, at least I have those 2 choices rather than 4 choices in front of me.
Yeah, true.
So, and then as we talked about a little bit earlier with the note taking, let me just give you guys some strategies with note taking. I'll let you guys in on a secret a little bit. My strengths and what I've been teaching have been reading and writing. So speaking, I'm also good at, and I've because I was an examiner for speaking, I was an examiner for writing. Reading, I've built up a system and a strategy. My weakness in teaching has always been listening. But in the last few months, when I've looked and analyzed CELPIP and then looked at different resources, because the CELPIP's a bit different. With IELTS, you have the questions as you're listening. So the strategies I was teaching there, keywords, eliminate, look at positive, negatives, that's part of the picture. But now that you have the listening and the questions after with the later CELPIP sections, that's where I've shifted a bit and gone more into how do I teach the note taking, which I had other teachers, like often I would teach reading and writing at the university I was at, and there was other teachers doing listening and speaking. That's why I was weaker in the listening area, but now I'm relearning teaching. So this is from Wilfrid Laurier University, which is in Ontario. It's from a few years ago, obviously 208, but I've liked some of their information. So I just want to highlight some of this, and then we'll probably end off our question and answer time for CELPIP. But I will repeat some of this in our listening class because the strategies are the same for either of those. But as you can see here with their methods, they talk about ideas. So that's where I said key words, key ideas. Signals mean your transition signals. So when the instructor or the recording says, after that, next, however, on the other hand, those are transition signals that you recognize or should know for reading. You'll use them in your speaking. You'll use them in your writing. Here, they'll help you when you're going through different sections to make because our listening is usually going to be organized like we write and speak. It'll be in sections and they'll guide you through part by part. And then some of like with the notes. So let's go down a little bit and just see. That's more of lectures in class. It's talking about reading notes ahead of time. We don't have the thing to do. Here though is when you're listening to the 2 or 3 minute sections for CELPIP, listen first for the central concepts. So that listening we did was the man and the woman about the problem of her not doing and not getting her work done. And there's usually 2 or 3 points within that. And then as we talked about, you write down 2 or 3 details, keywords from the details. So main idea, she's busy after work with her family. Specific idea, pick up son, make dinner, help son till 10 p.m. So that's where you're narrowing down instead of writing everything that they say, which is what they identify there. Okay, those are also for lectures in class. So this type about active listening, meaning writing down some questions, questioning it, interpreting it, etc., those you can incorporate when you're going through these exercises from esl/labs.com. So when you're going through what I used to teach students here, and Tofik, you may remember from past classes, I would say go through the listening, listen and make sure you're getting 70 or 80% of the questions right in the one level, and then go to the next level. So start at intermediate, then go to difficult, then go down to the academic like we talked about. But now what I'm recommending is go, same thing, go to intermediate, listen to some of the passages and some of the information. So listen to 4 or 5 of them, answer the questions, but then go back and do the next step, which I've talked about. Analyze the questions, get familiar with what types of questions are asked, then go to 5 new sections and don't look at the questions, just take notes and then go and look at the questions. And if you're doing that for 10, 15 minutes a day or every second day, 2 or 3 times a week, as you go through these different levels, you'll find your note taking for specific short passages will increase. And that's where you can then advance and move a little bit further in improving your listening skill. This, I'm just skipping through, and this I think is, yeah, this just says it's not easy. You have to persevere and keep doing it. So let me just stop there. As a quick review, what we've talked about today is keywords, positive, negatives, main ideas, specific detail type questions. Those are helping you in the earlier sections. With the note taking, we talked about practicing using ESL Labs and be writing down some words, some ideas. And then as you get into the harder, longer passages, you try to narrow down your answers if you're not always sure of which idea it might be or what section that it could be from. Any last questions before we end off for this session for CELPIP listening and question and answer time?
Yeah, actually, I just have 2 quick questions.
Yep.
What about practicing on IELTS tests?
Yes.
Does it make any confliction between CELPIP?
No. For listening, you can use both. So the bigger difference between listening in IELTS and CELPIP is the types of questions. So in IELTS, sorry, you'll have fill in the blank, you'll have matching, you might have, there might be true, false, not given, multiple choice for sure. With the CELPIP, you're just going to have the make a choice. So either they give you the different, it's usually the multiple choice, or it might be some word or phrase and then they fill in the blank, but it's just
Yeah.
usually those 2 styles.
Okay. So, what about watching videos with the subtitles? Is it better to practice on this or watching the website that you said about,
Yeah.
following this up?
So the reason I don't usually, because when I go through IELTS and Facebook groups, almost everyone says from different countries, go watch movies, go watch TV, go watch
Yeah.
BBC News, etc.
Yeah.
What I recommend is that's a process, but it's slower. And I'll use so in Canada we have Canadian Broadcast Corporation, CBC. So they actually have, so if you're just listening to things in random, you don't know the level of difficulty that it is. And that's why I say it's a slower way. You're getting lots of information, but how do you know what questions to ask? So first of all, it's passive because you're just listening. You're not getting questions asked to think about and identify and answer after, which is why I recommend the ESL Labs, because you do. But the second choice is BBC News or CBC, Canadian Broadcast Corporation. They have a section for English learners at levels. You can see here, it says level 1, level 2, and past lessons. And down here, it shows CLB levels, CLB 4, CLB 6. Most of these are 4, 5, and 6. The CLB is similar to the Canadian, so CLB is Canadian language benchmarks. It's similar to the CELPIP scoring, not similar, it's exact. So a 6 there is a 6 in CELPIP. So now
Yeah.
sometimes students say to me, but I want a 9. Why am I listening to CELPIP 6 or CLB 6 information? It's not they've put this designation as a general category, but you're still going to be learning, and you're practicing the strategies with something that might be a little bit easier. So you're getting good in the strategies. If I'm a coach of a basketball team, I don't take you to go play the toughest teams in the league in the first 2 months if I can avoid it, even
Yeah.
the first 6 months. I want you to practice, learn strategies, practice them, then have some competition and see how you're doing, make adjustments. Maybe when you're shooting, your wrist is a little bit off, or your footwork is a bit incorrect, etc. I'm analyzing, looking, changing those different things. Then we go to more challenging things later on. So if you're going to listen to subtitles or text, do it on these types of sites where you have information, you have a video or topics, but then you also have, so they have the transcript, and then they have some questions. And so you have that information, transcript or listening, questions to answer, and then see how you're doing and take notes as you're doing it. Those are your pieces to help you with CELPIP.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
and again, as I mentioned at the start, we'll end off here, but as I mentioned at the start, we also have the units in our Facebook group, and so you can go to the top of the Facebook group now, and there's more in-depth listening information for this different parts of CELPIP.
Okay.
So
Thank you
thank you
so
guys
much.
for joining. We're going to switch out of this Zoom room, and we have a different link for IELTS. So the reason I do that is because some students only want to join for IELTS or for CELPIP, etc. But I encourage you join for a bit of IELTS, and then in 45 minutes we're going to have a conversation. It's for starting and working in businesses in Canada. So this week we'll talk about business plans and resources from the government, and then next week, we're going to talk about how do you market and advertise in North America, because it's effective in different countries, but it's a bit different when I compare with Indonesia or Vietnam or other countries I've been in. It's more content of how you're an expert instead of just on billboards or in the news or TV, etc. So that's kind of for the future. But anyway, so thank you guys, and we'll hopefully see you guys in the IELTS class right after this.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you. See you.
Yeah, thank you, Tofi.